Dangin Nira. Dan am keyekin uframevna. Ebniskodyelalfa. Lesson 27. Gerunds. In the story of Goldilocks in the previous video, you may have noticed a word that looked slightly odd. Pisreltoina. It looks like the verb pisreltoi, to see, has been shoehorned into a noun. And in a sense, that's exactly what has happened. Pisreltoina is what's known as a gerund, a verb noun. Fear not, unlike participles which have 10 different forms, there are only 2 forms for gerunds, an active and a passive form. To form a gerund, you take off the oi ending of the verb infinitive and add on the gerundive ending, either oina for an active gerund, or oabna for a passive one. For example, taking the verb histuoi, to obey, we get histuoina, obedience, and histuoabna, the act of being obeyed. Used in a sentence, if we define uweftin as fun, histuoabna muhuk uweftin, zof histuoina ged muhuk uweftin. Being obeyed is fun, but obeying is not fun. Let's take the gerunds of another verb since it's so easy. Taking Nudoihoi, to fantasize about, we get Nudoihoina, fantasizing, and Nudoihoabna, being fantasized about. Now there's finally one more thing we can do with verbs. Gerunds are nouns that represent the action of the verb it's derived from. But what about nouns describing actors who do the action of the verbs or have the action performed on them? We have a couple more endings for those, a set for each noun case. First we have the actor words, the ones who would be the subject of the verb. These come in 3 flavors, one for each gender. First is okra, which is neuter, then orsa for males, and osma for females. For example, taking the verb torkoi, to lead, we have torkokra, leader, without any specific gender connotations, torkorsa, male leader, and torkosma, female leader. You may remember from the second conversation video, tevanokra, student or learner, and uframokra, teacher. These are actor words derived from tevanoi, to learn, and uframoi, to teach, respectively. Next is the acti, the player taking the accusative case. This only comes in a neutral gender, as do the rest of these endings. For the acti, the ending is evna. For example, Meteroi, to tickle, would yield meterevna, something tickled or tickly. But if this ending is attached to a verb whose root ends in a vowel, you instead add tevna as the ending. For example, Vohyuoi, to intimidate, yields Vohyutevna, intimidate. Next is the recipient, the player taking the dative case, which takes the ending elkha. For example, taking Tofoi, to drop, we get tofelkha, person something is dropped to. This also has a slightly different ending after vowels, changing to telkha. For example, beoi, to give, yields betelkha, person something is given to, or recipient. Finally, we have the instrument, the player taking the ablative case, taking the ending opta. For example, taking Hrisroi, to scratch, we get Hrisrota, scratching tool or scratcher. Once you refer to these actors, you'll want to refer to other players with regard to the verb in reference to it, and for that you need the preposition esk. Esk indicates that what follows is in reference to the verb that precedes it, if it were in true verb form instead of a noun. Words that follow esk should be in the case that they would be if the verb were being used. For example, Nenhelikevna esknenrisa, the speech of the man, or that which the man said. Compare this to Nenvarmkokra esknenrise, the killer of the man, or the person who killed the man. You can think of this structure as an alternative to relative clauses. Also bear in mind that this also applies to gerunds. For example, defining Zowidroi as to approve of, Nenrisa ged Zowidrolok nenvarmkoine esknenbave. The man did not approve of the killing of the dog. Let's have a couple more example sentences. Nenduklokra esknenbetevne hastitolok twesdukloike, Fic helicetek meglocrerg exc nen reclonde. The buyer of the gift wanted to return it, so he spoke to the owner of the store. Nen mapatelkha exc nen irme tofetekke. The person to whom the ball was thrown dropped it. Notice how the esque construction can be a lot more compact than a relative clause. Nen kelokra gomeok kit nudoihoina morneuk zevrin, gomeok kit niskoina morneuk dadueomin. The runner thinks that fantasizing is bad. He thinks that action is better. Now that we've turned verbs into nouns, why not do the same for adjectives? First, we need the abstraction noun, the ness word. To do this, remove the in ending and add on omerma instead. For example, taking Hemrin Lonely, we get hemromerma, loneliness. As another example, defining brisena as virtue, dibdomerma gedmuhuk brisena. Stupidity is not a virtue. Next, we can create words for people who exhibit the adjective in question. To do this, remove the in ending and add on either akra for neuter, arsa for a male, or asma for a female. For example, defining Dwoityin as awkward, we get Dwoityakra, awkward person of no particular gender, Dwoityarsa, awkward man, and Dwoityasma, awkward woman. For example, defining Flegohoi as to stare at, Ged Hrisroi kitnen Dwoityarsa flegohokse. I don't like that the awkward man is staring at me. Finally, we can create a word for an object that exhibits the adjective. To do this, remove in and add on adya. For example, defining lasatin as magenta, then we get lasatadya, magenta object. So now you know how to turn verbs and adjectives into nouns. Make sure you know these new words before you move on to the next.